pleasant good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Prime Minister's press conference. And this press conference is not only the first for the year, but it also marks the resumption of this regularly held activity. I think it's still safe to wish you all a happy and prosperous new year, seeing as this is the first time for 2022 that I'm greeting you. And I hope your year is off to a stellar start. I would like to welcome this morning members of the Federal Cabinet and the National Assembly, members of the Diplomatic Corps, permanent secretaries and other senior government officials, representatives of the media and other specially invited guests, as well as nationals and residents of St. Kitts and Nevis, right here at home and living abroad. So good morning to you once again. Maybe we're off to a little rough start this morning, but thank you so much. This morning, the Prime Minister is hosting this press conference to update the country on matters of national interest, and it allows the media to pose questions to him, which he and the other members of cabinet will answer directly. He is supported by senior members of the government civil service who are also here to answer questions where they can. This event is being carried live on several radio stations who are our media partners, and I'm happy to announce that the media houses carrying this event live this morning are Freedom FM, Sugar City FM, Vaughan Radio, Win FM, ZIZ Radio, as well as the social media platforms of the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service, also known as SKNIS, and our national media house, ZIZ, is not only carrying it live on radio and television, but as well as their YouTube and Facebook pages. The press conference is coming to you from the National Emergency Management Agency headquarters in Limekiln, also known as NEMA. Just a few announcements before we welcome the Prime Minister to make his opening presentation. I would like to let you know that the highly anticipated Leadership Matters program resumes next week, Tuesday. That is the 15th of February, and I've gotten a lot of questions about that, so I'm happy to let you know that Leadership Matters resumes next week, Tuesday, February 15th. Also, the handing over ceremony of the Petrocasas homes takes place on February 18th. That's also next week. And those homes will be handed over from the Venezuelan government. So to repeat, the handing over ceremony of the Petrocasas homes takes place on February 18th, and they are being handed over by the Venezuelan government. At this time, can we welcome the Prime Minister to the lectern to make his opening remarks. Mr. Prime Minister. While we await the arrival of the Prime Minister, who is just outside, who will be joining us shortly, allow me to let you know that if we will also be facilitating media houses who are not here today with us, who are not able to send a representative to the press conference. So I think it's important to note that we will be facilitating their questions and posing the questions to the Prime Minister on their behalf. It's very important that we try to accommodate as many media houses as possible, as this is an opportunity for them to get the questions that they require on behalf of their audiences. We know that they have a lot of programs and ways of engaging the public, and they would find out various issues of concern to the public, and so this is one of the ways in which they can get those issues addressed. So at this time, I would like to welcome the Prime Minister to make his opening remarks, followed by which he will take questions. Mr. Prime Minister.
Members of the media, cabinet, colleagues, I want to thank all for tuning in to this, the first of the series of monthly press conferences to be put on by the Office of the Prime Minister. This being the first, it is perhaps opportune that I should extend my very best wishes to all for 2022. I am privileged to address you in my capacity as Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, and in the context of our commitment to the good governance agenda, to inform you on several matters of state. I shall begin with updates on the implementation of our people-centered 2022 budget commitments, particularly in relation to our unprecedented third stimulus package, comprising, among other things, the extension of our income support to disadvantaged workers and persons unemployed on account of COVID-19, and the extension of the fuel support to passenger bus operators, and the inclusion of certified taxi owners as beneficiaries under this program. During 2021, my government provided income support to 3,053 persons for a total payout of $7.9 million. In addition, 109 persons benefited from the fuel subsidy program. The total payout to this program was $129,800. The Disability Support Program benefited 158 persons for a total payout of $486,500. That's a substantial payout to families with children and or other persons with disabilities. $486,500. The combined payout for these three programs was $8.58 million, and the total beneficiaries account for 3,320 persons benefited from the second stimulus package that we outlined last year. In 2022, the income support and fuel subsidy program are being extended for a further 3 months. The fuel subsidy is being expanded to include taxi operators who have a travel-approved seal. Presently, we are advised that there are 202 taxi and tour operators across the Twin Island Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis holding such a seal. Persons who applied last year for these programs under consideration need not reapply in 2022. The applications that were previously submitted are in the process of being reviewed to determine whether those persons now qualify. In other words, we have the information to do the necessary cross-checking. The criteria is well established, and the team that is put together is constantly reviewing the situation to make determinations whether any of the previous applicant continues to qualify for support. In fact, the first fuel subsidy payment for this year was made by the Treasury on February 3rd, 2022, and 104 bus owners who qualified had been paid. Again, we have the records last time. Unless you are new and there's a new situation, there's no need for any bus operators already in the system to reapply. Monday, persons, that is new applicants now wishing to apply for the income support or fuel subsidy may do so from Monday, February 14, 2020, by completing the relevant application form. I am advised by the Ministry of Finance that this form can be downloaded from the Ministry of Finance website at www.mof, as in Ministry of Finance short form, mof.gov.kn. I repeat, the site on which the form can be downloaded for any of these support programs, income subsidy or the fuel subsidy, is www, that is www.mof.gov, that is gov.kn. And this form can be accessed using the COVID-19 tab, and it will be available both in English and in Spanish. So we are all inclusive, and we are showing sensitivity and recognition to the fact that we have a growing Spanish community. Many of them are our citizens and permanent residents. Persons who applied last year need not reapply. The forms that were previously submitted are in the process of being reviewed for continued eligibility. Turning now to the issue of the safety and security of our nation, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis continue to enjoy a relatively high level of peace and security under the Team Unity administration. Indeed, we have seen a marked reduction in homicides, which have fallen dramatically from a record high of 35 in 2011 to a low of 10 in 2020. In 2021, the year just ended, we had 3 homicides more than in 2020. The police aims to reduce this figure to single digits in the near future through intelligence-led proactive policing and improved community policing. The successful build-out of programs in support of our Alternative Lifestyle Pathway program, the Explorers Club, and better utilization of resources such as our CCTV monitoring system and forensic lab will complement our efforts in sustaining reductions in major crimes. The detection rate for the Federation as a whole stood at 43% in 2021, which is an improvement over the 40% and 39.3% detection rate in 2019 and 2020, respectively. Indeed, I am advised by ACP Mitchell, our ACP for crime, that 2021, the overall detection rate of 43% represents the highest detection rate in our federation since 2000. So this is a significant achievement, and I want to commend Commissioner Brandy and his team for doing better at crime detection. I should say to you that among the various categories of crimes, the detection rate varies, some as high as 80-odd%, some 54%, and some as low as 23%, creating the mixed bag over which the total of 43% has been derived. I want now to turn attention to the health sector, and I am pleased to report that in 2022, we shall commence the build-out of Phase 3 of the JNF General Hospital. This will be a significant investment of over $26 million, which will result in improvement in 12 service areas at our main hospital, including pathology, labs, a new psychiatric wing, a new central sterilization unit, central medical stores, kitchen, cafeteria, laundry, conference, and lecture halls. All these are contemplated as part of the overall budget of $26 million. This, of course, will take several months and perhaps will end up being a multi-year project, but it is significant that we shall start the phase build-out of Phase 3 in 2022. The addition of these brand new facilities, plus the recruitment of medical specialists identified in our budget for 2022. These specialists include cardiologists, and we are putting a heavy emphasis on that. Indeed, it is one of those NCDs, non-communicable diseases, that worry the Caribbean region and contribute significantly to deaths. And so we are going to set up a special wing, a special unit to deal with issues of what we call heart disease. So we are bringing in then a cardiologist. We will recruit cardiology technicians, cath lab nurses, cath lab technicians, and MRI technologists, just to name a few. I believe the combination of all of these, improvement in physical facility, addition of top quality human resources, would result in the enhancement in the quality of health care and improved conditions, not only for those who will go to our hospitals. Indeed, we would wish no one end up going there, but at least also for the workers. I present more good news from the health sector. And when I speak about no one going there, that all of us are well. So we don't have impatience. That, of course, is an ideal situation, which will not happen. So we are preparing for the eventuality that in the normal course of things, persons will get sick. We want the minimal number of persons really at all times having to seek health care at our hospitals. That is why our primary health care must always be sustained and maintained, because prevention is always better than the cure. Consistent with our 2022 budget commitments outlined at paragraph 87 of my budget address, I am pleased to report that the cost of treatment of hemodialysis and oncology patients has been reduced by a significant 50% effective February 1st, 2022. In real terms, the cost of hemodialysis treatment has been reduced from $800 to $400 per session. This is a massive saving in any language. Those who are uninsured will benefit from a 50% reduction on the portion of the cost of the treatment not covered by insurance. In other words, this massive saving is really intended for the uninsured. We appreciate that some persons are financially vulnerable may have insurance, but the insurance does not cover the full cost. And we are saying that on that portion of the cost not covered, the 50% will apply. Those who have no insurance at all should strictly move from $800 to $400 per session. I want to turn to some other capital projects in the health sector. First, the St. Peter's Health Center, a massive and important health facility that the Team Unity administration is making available for the people of St. Peter's and indeed to all of our citizens, because every health center is open to receive our citizens and residents. A cabinet committee led by the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Sean Richards, and supported by a technical team drawn from health, finance, legal, and public works, is due to present recommendations on the way forward for the resumption of work on this important facility. And of course, we expect that in the near future, we will have work resumed there. With respect to the Bastia Health Center, I am advised that all of the background studies have been done, including the general scope of works to facilitate the design of a highly refurbished health center, offering improved quality care and services to the people of Bastia and the country at large. I could not end this positive news on our health sector without an update on our success in the battle with COVID-19. St. Kitts and Nevis has one of the highest vaccination and the lowest death rates among its peers in the hemisphere. As of Wednesday, February 9th, 2022, 82.3% of the adults had their first dose, and 76.9% are fully vaccinated. Between the two islands making up the Federation, we have St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Kitts with the higher vaccination rate, that is about 87%, and the CMO should advise and correct if there's a need. 87% of the adults in St. Kitts are vaccinated and just about have had their first dose, and 69+% of those on the island of Nevis would have had their first dose. So there is a gap in terms of the vaccination rates inter-islands. And similarly, when we look at those fully vaccinated, the gap continues there. So we would want to close the gap and have, of course, our overall vaccination rate improve. And so we want to encourage not just those in Nevis where there is a substantial gap, but even more persons in St. Kitts to come forward and to be vaccinated. The high level of vaccination coverage is allowing us to remove restrictions. We are also relying on persons to exercise good judgment in protecting themselves and their families from COVID-19. There is only so much the state can do to protect individuals from their own devices, from their own selves. And we try hard through our NEOC briefing and other public education interventions to alert people, educate and inform, and to provide them the facts regarding COVID-19 and other dangers which they may face. We believe that after 2 years of doing so successfully, it is now time for our people to put into practice what they would have been advised and taught and guided to do over the last 2 years. Even as I speak now, I think the country is fairly comfortable that we are overcoming the fourth wave of the pandemic. And certainly we would have hoped that we would not have had to get into the situation of a fourth wave of the pandemic. And the nigh 3,000 cases that have been added as a result of this particular fourth wave. What is important, thanks again to the hard work of our health professionals and the discipline of many, we are seeing a reduction. The new cases have been significantly reduced. And in that regard, I think in respect to this particular wave, over the last 7 days or so, St. Kitts have had one of the more significant reduction in the rate of the COVID-19 virus spreading in the community. And that is in a comparative basis when we look at the data across the currency union. On the advice of our health experts and the National Task Force, the Cabinet has recently, in fact just today, approved the recommendation to relax restrictions on mass events that affect entertainment and the sporting communities. And we shall do so as of this Saturday, February 12th. In other words, we have removed restrictions on mass events related or being organized by the entertainment and sporting communities as of Saturday the 12th. We urge everyone to be responsible and, of course, to comply with any direction of the police. We make the point that notwithstanding the relaxation of restrictions, residual authority always, I repeat, always resides with the police or remains with the police. And any event started could be stopped at any time on the intervention of the police in accordance, of course, with the law. So I just want to warn people, it is not now a free-for-all, we could do anything everywhere. We know in normal times, if we are going to have an event, we have to seek the permission of the police. That will still be required. That will still be required. And those who are careful enough to have read police permission, whether it is for a dance, a picnic, or whatever, will say at any time, this permission can be withdrawn. That is why sometimes you have a vet and the police comes and persons say, we had permission. If you are being unruly, if you are not behaving in a manner that is circumspect, taking all the circumstances into account, please be advised that the police is authorized by law to bring any event to an end or to suspend them. But again, we have relaxed, and therefore any denial of mass events that would have taken place and are to occur on or after the 12th will be reviewed by the Commissioner of Police in the context of the new mandate that has been given by the Cabinet. I want to place and record the country's highest commendation to our National Task Force and Health Team for the work they have done and the work that they will continue to do in the foreseeable future. I want to also remind our citizens and residents that the most powerful tools that we have in this battle against COVID-19 still remain vaccination, and abiding by the non-pharmaceutical measures, wearing your mask, observing social distancing, and doing all those things that you ought reasonably to do to protect yourselves. So if you see a crowd of persons and you are concerned, don't join the crowd because you are concerned. The decisions now have to be yours. If you are at a fete and the fete is going out of control, excuse yourself. The decision now has to be yours. So again, we are an intelligent people, high literacy. Let us reflect itself in how we govern ourselves as we move out of the shadow of COVID-19. COVID-19, of course, has destabilized everywhere. Large countries, small countries, they have been no exception. COVID-19 has cost much. You would recall that our first stimulus package was estimated to run us in over $120 million of unbudgeted expenditure. You would recall that our second stimulus package was anticipated to have cost us about $15 million. We have not yet worked the tab in relation to the third stimulus package. But we know that it has been a burden. We have had to spend, for example, $25 million in additional expenditures to the health sector alone. New ambulances, pharmaceutical products, and other materials necessary to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. We have felt the impact on our economy as thousands of persons were unemployed. Thankfully, over time, as we open up, more persons in agriculture, in manufacturing, and now tourism have been able to earn a living. The consequence of COVID and the currency union has been an average of about 16% reduction, loss of GDP in the region of which we are part. Of course, it varies among and between countries. Some have lost as high as 20+% of their economic activity as a result of COVID-19. So it is a serious matter, started essentially as a health crisis and then morphed into a broader economic and societal crisis. Smallest country in the hemisphere, we have done very well to be where we are now. And we give God thanks. Thankfully, we are able to note and experience the fact that our country now is stable, and clearly there are signs that our St. Kitts and Nevis is getting back on track. In this regard, I want to pay some attention to some recent data regarding the performance of some of the critical sectors. I want first to turn to the agricultural sector, because food security remains an important challenge, and it is one which we have to endeavor to take on board in our policy planning going forward. During the period January to December 2021, crop and livestock combined recorded a significant 21% increase in production. That is, production of food here moved from 2.92 million pounds in 2021 compared to 2.4 million pounds in 2020. This resulted in this significant increase of 22% in the estimated dollar value of these produce, which moved from 9.55 million in 2020 to almost 11.68 million in 2021. So both in terms of actual physical output and market value, which is another important indicator, we have seen in excess of 20% increase in the performance of the agricultural sector. And we remain optimistic that this sector will grow even more in 2022. Based again on the policies that we have put in place, based again on the strong support which our stimulus package provided over the last 2 years, and the new policy frame in which agriculture is taking place, based on the commitments we have made to revive the Bayford's farm, provided and strengthening our livestock sector, and providing, as it were, an academy of sort for practicing farmers to be able to see agriculture as its best. And in agriculture there we were referring to the crops and livestock. Agriculture, though, using the typical definition of FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, also extend to the fisheries sector. And I want to turn to that. Our fisheries sector is back on track. The data from the director of our Marine Resource Department reveal that there has been a significant increase in fisheries products in 2021, the year just ended, compared to the preceding year. Specifically, fish landings increased from 671,000 pounds in 2020 to 760,020 pounds, with a market value of some $8.4 million in 2021. The major increases were realized among the following fishery types. Conchs increased 30% in 2021. Lobster, 148%. Reef and demersal species recorded a 7% increase in 2021, leading to the overall expansion of the fisheries sector in double digits. So again, we are very pleased by what we see happening here. Significant improvement. And yes, there are some deficiencies which have to be addressed in response to some reductions in other categories, such as near reef fishing and coastal fisheries. And I'm advised by the director that they are addressing that particular challenge through training and by the supply of additional materials, fads, and other materials to our fisher folks. I was pleasantly surprised to have learned that we have over 1,200 fishermen and women registered and on record. There has been a significant growth of the number of participants in fishing since the start of the COVID-19. And so we are able to get a lot more local fishes available. We want this trend to continue. And based on the performance 2020-2021, we think we are heading in the right direction. The first quarter results, of course, would provide some confirmatory evidence as to this positive direction. Let me commend the Permanent Secretary in Agriculture, Mr. Ron Collins, and the heads of the department in Agriculture, Dr. Tracy Challenger, and of course, Dr. Mark Williams, who leads the fisheries subsector for this, I would say, excellent performance to date. I want to thank the Permanent Secretary for getting the deliverables, for getting the output, for getting us attuned to better ways in which we can feed ourselves and reduce the tendency and the vulnerability to turn outward to feed ourselves. Turning attention now to the manufacturing sector. Most of the workers in the manufacturing sector are now back on their job. Indeed, more persons were working in the sector in 2021 than in 2020. And this is a good sign of the recovery of the sector on the way. It is to the credit of the high performance of our workers in our export manufacturing enclave and the other sectors of the manufacturing plant that in spite of great competition globally, and in particular from China, that we continue to lead the OECS in the export of merchandise to the USA. Of course, our merchandise not only go to the USA, but they go to Europe. That speaks to the quality of work that is being done in our industrial estates, at the industrial site in Barstow, and of course in Sandy Point. Let us not take the contribution, the skills, and the performance of our workers in these factories for granted. We are not competing on the cost of labor. For St. Kitts and Nevis has the highest minimum wage in the OECS, and I suspect by extension in CARICOM. The competition is on things such as the skill, the efficiency, and the productivity of our workforce here. China, of course, will outdo us any day in terms of the wage they pay. So we are competing in a highly competitive international market, and we are doing well in this regard. Factories such as API, Harrow Service and Kits Limited, Cajola Limited, Jaro Electronics, they continue to penetrate external markets with their quality electronic products in the main. We are expecting in 2022 to see expansion at Cajola Cristada Limited and Jaro. Our Carib Brewery has also successfully penetrated several markets in the region and is making progress with significant renovations and expansions at its plant. The broad manufacturing sector, that is the local manufacturing arm, our bakers and our agri-processors, if you will, and the export manufacturing enclave to which I made reference, this broad brush of the manufacturing sector is contributing over 1,300 jobs in our federation. This means that in 2021, we had an additional just under 100 additional persons working in manufacturing and helping to support their families. Whenever more persons get out to work, it is a good thing for family life, and it is a good thing for our country. So this is good news. 1,316 jobs, preliminary figures from Social Security, were employed in the manufacturing sector of St. Kitts and Nevis. We expect in 2022 to see even higher employment in the export enclave manufacturing sector as a result of innovation and new lines and products being added in our manufacturing plants. This is good news, and it is a positive sign that our manufacturing sector is surely getting back on track, slowly but surely. And as a sign of its confidence in the direction of our country, Carey Brewery continues its construction work, having completed the rebuilding of its administrative offices and lab at a cost of $2.3 million. I'm advised that production capacity has been expanded at our Carey Brewery with the installation last week of another 450 hectoliter bright beer vessel tank. In 2022, the Carey Brewery intends to exceed for a third year in a row the 1 million threshold of 1.2 million cases of brewery products, with 1.2 million cases of brewery products. We recall recently that we had the good news maybe 3 years ago when they had first, in a very long time, attained the 1 million production mark of brewery products. They were able to repeat that last year, notwithstanding we were still heavily in the throes of COVID-19. And this year, they're hoping that at least they will reach 1.2, that is 1,200,000 cases of brewery products. And I wish them well in that regard. In the second quarter of 2022, the brewery will be installing and commissioning a new case packer, and it will invest a further $1.2 million in expanding its full product warehouse. In 2022, the brewery will be introducing 4 new products. I hope that their market reception will exceed and surpass their own expectations, because the introduction of these new products will require new people, more people at work, more people earning. Good news for our country. On Monday this week, our Minister of Labor provided an update on the prospects for further expansion in the manufacturing sector, including the contribution or the development of new products at Cajola Cristada Limited. When these things happen, it means that the entities are adjusting to market needs, and hopefully as a result of this, their sales will grow, their production demand will increase, resulting in a requirement for more persons to be at work. Tourism, the rebound of the tourism sector is quite evident. We see it regularly as we look seaside in Basti at Port Sante. while not yet close to the buoyancy of 2018-2019, the 2021-2022 cruise season. The cruise seasons typically would start in October and carry on to September the next year. Is that so, Madam Pierce of Tourism? You have a lag in between there. You have a peak and a lull, yes. But this season, 2021-2022, is off to an encouraging start in the context of our lived reality with COVID and the restrictions placed on cruise travel, both by the Centers of Disease Control in the USA and, of course, other governments to protect their citizens. I'm advised that we have had 158 cruise calls so far, with 138,022 cruise passengers. This compares well to the prior season, 2020-2021, when for 9 months, October 2020 to June 2021, there was 0 cruise calls and consequently 0 passengers. Given the COVID-19 situation, the cruise ships are not sailing at their usual maximum capacity as a precautionary health response. Turning to year arrivals, for January 22, I'm advised that we have had 6,683 passengers arriving in the Federation, and this is up 5,324 over the 1,350 passengers recorded in January of 2021. Of course, in January of 2021, we were in the throes, I think, of a community-related outbreak. So again, we are off to a respectable start, according to the data provided by SCASPA. To advertisement regarding vacancies that are occurring, both in the private and public sector. As I speak, there are several vacancies in various line ministries that have been advertised. For example, in our budget, and we spoke to it this morning, there are certain specialists that are going to be required to assist us in the improvement in our healthcare delivery. Those are outlined in our budget for last year, the cardiologists, etc., etc. And while we may not find persons resident within, we want our nationals abroad who are qualified to apply for these positions. With some of the new projects that are going to come on board, certain specialized skills in engineering, etc., will be required. And we want our people to be there to take advantage of these opportunities. And on that note, I want to give a reminder to all employers that work permits, should request for work permits, must comply with the existing labor laws. Before you can bring a foreigner, or rather a non-national, into the country to work, You have to make application to national security. And among the things that you are required to submit in support of the case is that you would have advertised the vacancy in the local jurisdictions at least for 3 consecutive weeks, if my memory is correct. We will hold strictly to that requirement to ensure that our nationals and residents here have a fair opportunity to benefit from any vacancies that may emerge in our Twin Islands space. On that note, I must commend our Labor Department for consistently posting vacancies on its job wall. I want to encourage those who are searching for jobs to check with our Labor Department or to check its Facebook page. That is the St. Kitts and Nevis Department of Labor. Between January and February, that wall has displayed some 38 vacancies across some 9 business establishments. In other words, there are opportunities for some people to make a choice in terms of employment. And I want to encourage those adults at home to visit that page, to be active in search of work, and to take work that is available now, not next week, not next month. You could, of course, free yourself from that job if something better comes along. There is a tendency among our people at times to be looking for the perfect job, to be looking for the job that I think I deserve. It is not a good practice. It's better to add some experience to your CV. It's better to get yourself better engaged in work and developing useful skills that you can take elsewhere until the perfect opportunity comes. Just last week we were having a discussion about a young man who had given up a job where he was earning significantly, probably several $1,000s. He had children, so he had to go and work to feed them. And he was industrious. He took a job in a government department, and government pays less at certain level than the private sector. And he was earning $3,000. He worked hard. He was an excellent worker in that department. This week I learned that he was going in the private sector, where he will earn near $8,000. To God we give the glory for him. But it is for me that he was prepared to take what was reasonably available at the time and to wait until something better comes to him. Some people at home looking for the perfect job. When I left school, I thought with my accounting skills that I should go and work in a bank, and I applied to every bank. Up to now, I'm still waiting. I had several interviews, including interview at the Central Bank. And they tell you the nice things, perhaps they tell every person who make it to the interview. You will hear from us in due course. And when I had almost given up, I looked over Andy Bay Road and I saw the Social Security building. I said, what is that place? This building looked nice. So I would apply to it. And I applied. I was interviewed. And at the end of the interview, Robert Manning, God bless his soul, said to me, you have done very well. I'm going to recommend you to the board. I shouldn't see a problem. I don't see a problem. And so you will hear from us in a couple weeks. If all goes well, and he remembered to say if at the board. So if all didn't go well, I couldn't blame Mr. Manning. He said if all went well. and I got a job at Social Security. My preference was the bank, but I will tell you, I don't know what banking experience is. Never got a chance to work in the bank. I could say maybe it is part of divinity that now I am part of the Monetary Council of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, which has regulatory powers for the bank. But I went to Social Security and had one of the best working experience, working with people like Miss Yearwood, now a blessed memory in records, working with Ernest Amory, then in charge of the lower floor, could still see where he sat. Working with Cephalin Mills, the director, having moved into the accounting department. And the rest of this is history. My message to young people, there is not a perfect job, but there is a perfect opportunity to work. All the adults and parents who have children home, who don't want that job, who don't want to make a start, I'm appealing to you, encourage them to do something. No matter how small, no matter how lowly, honest work is good work and ought to be encouraged. If they were to wait for the perfect job, like I waited long to be in the bank, they may remain in your house for a very long while. I say to adults who are concerned about jobs and appointment, but your child is young. In the course of a lifetime, people are expected to change jobs many times, and there is research on that. So if your child, you want them to go to study in a year or two, why are you so fussy then about them getting a perfect job now? They should be just getting work experience, because they are not going to be staying there for any length of time. And so I'm calling for new attitudinal disposition towards work and life, where we are more positive and we are more thankful for opportunities. I think in this particular note, I would want to pause and to take questions from the media. And let me, while the media is getting ready, say thank you to the cabinet colleagues and to recognize formally our Deputy Prime Minister, our Minister of Environment, our Minister of Human Settlement, our Attorney General, our Minister of Labor, our Minister of Health, and Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, Ambassador Powell, Ambassador Osborne, and the senior functionaries of the government, and all, of course, who are here today. Thank you for coming.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Morning.
Devon Cornelius, Win FM. Just a few questions. The anniversary of the Buckley's Uprising was recently celebrated by the Nyabingi Theocracy Order, where they called for the erection of a monument to recognize the significance of the uprising. How important is national acknowledgement of this historical moment, and are there plans to erect a monument that recognizes its importance? And two, what is the status of the investigation involving Tourism Minister Lindsey Grant and police officers? Explain in detail what exactly is the police investigating, as questions are raised about the reason for wanting to stop the operations at the night spot. Thank you.
Good Good morning, Mervyn Thompson, ZIZ. Can an update be given on the commissioning of the traffic lights at College Street and Birdwalk, the digitization of health records? When will the carnival closing ceremony be held? And finally, the residents of Taylors inquire about the remedying of the drainage system there to eradicate the unpleasant smell. Can an update or response be given to that, please?
Could you repeat the last one?
Taylors of residents, residents of Taylors, they inquire about remedying the drainage system to eradicate the unpleasant smell.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Lashan Dixon, St. Kitts News Observer. With plans of moving past the shadows of the COVID-19 pandemic, as you said this morning, and countries now relaxing COVID-19 protocols, when will we see similar relaxations here in St. Kitts and Nevis to make this an endemic, as being reported? And also, what plans are in place to fortify the health system and protect it in the future from being overwhelmed? And what is the future of mask mandates and vaccine requirements?
Good morning, Glenn Bart, SKN Newsline. Mr. Prime Minister, on the matter of the good governance agenda that we spoke about even since last year, could you, in two specific areas, that is the Integrity in Public Life Act and the Freedom of Information Act, provide some detailed update as to what really is happening for the implementation of these two acts? Additionally, please clarify if, in the situation of the Integrity in Public Life Act, whether or not high-ranking members of the public service, but basically not civil servants, will have to disclose their assets annually and publicly. We have been informed that some persons who were terminated from employment for not taking the COVID-19 vaccine have not received severance payments. Could this matter be clarified? On the issue of electoral reform, how soon can the country begin to see substantial movement on matters related to campaign financing, the boundary situation, and overseas voters? And if the Minister of Human Settlement can explain for us the selection criteria for the allocation of houses to residents of St. Kitts. Thank you.
Good morning, Tian Coggins, Government Information. First question, would the relaxation of restrictions allow both unvaccinated and vaccinated persons at events? And secondly, would the relaxation of COVID-19 measures relate to the return of contact sports, specifically football? The third question would be, some sections of society have been reporting potholes on the Old Road Bay Road. Can we say if any work will be done on that project? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we will pause here. We have some questions, well, at least one that had been put with respect to the criteria for the selection of persons for homes. The Minister of Human Settlements, of course, had been identified by the person posing that question. I'm not calling him at this point in time, just trying to get some order There were a number of questions posed with respect to our good governance agenda. The Integrity in Public Life Act was identified. What was the second piece of legislation? Sorry, Freedom of Information and Freedom of Information Act. So that one will be addressed by the Attorney General. The issue of the electoral reform, Attorney General, take note. The AG will come up the appropriate time to address this. The non-payment of severance payment, the Minister of Labour will be able to address that. And those related to the physical infrastructure, we are talking potholes and Old Road Bay and drainage issues where pertinent. The Minister for Public Infrastructure is here, and he will address those, including also the matter raised early, the commissioning of the street lights, the digitalization of the health records. We have our Minister of Health, so I will call on her appropriately to address that. The matter of the police investigation, Minister Grant, the Commissioner of Police, is here, and his ACP is here. The issue with respect to the Buckley's uprising and the erection of a monument is an important one, and I suspect in the context of our celebration in February, Black History Month, it is a critical part of the history of St. Kitts and Nevis. And we have set up a committee that has been headed by the member for St. Christopher III to deal with this particular matter and other matters with respect to the Buckley's uprising. And so I will say, not to preempt an answer, that it is a work in progress. In fact, one of the things that had been put before me for discussion was whether or not those who featured prominently in this uprising should not be honored and be acclaimed as national heroes of St. Kitts and Nevis. So it is a significant and weighty matter. Of course, there is a process for persons to be so designated, and that will be put to the appropriate committee to do an evaluation. The Buckley's uprising way back in the 1930s was part of the struggle for economic and social justice in our country, where men and women were prepared, as it were, to don their cutlasses and machetes and other implements to make a stand for improvement in the quality of life. And as a result of this, the disturbances way back at this critical point in our colonial history, we had the Moyne Commission, which would come and would look at all of these things, investigate, and to make recommendations for the amelioration of life for the people, not just in St. Kitts and Nevis, but in the wider Caribbean region. The Buckley's riot was, as it were, the forerunner to other uprisings which will take place elsewhere in the Caribbean. And put together in that context has an important history that we ought not to disnotice. When we forget our history, we can easily allow circumstance of the present to, as it were, allow us to relive the ordeal of the past. So I put that context to say, yes, for me personally, this is an important part of the national tapestry of St. Kitts and Nevis, which we have to preserve, honor, and commemorate in ways that make sense, in ways that add to national pride, national cohesion, and national memory. Memory of the struggles of those who went before us. Memory of the causes that are still of great relevance today. The bread and butter issues for so many people impacted by the Buckley's rising, and the expression of the needs for workers' rights to become an enhanced part of how we do things in St. Kitts and Nevis. The evolution of the labor movement in the Caribbean had all been about issues of social and economic justice, and the Buckley's uprising fits well into that regional endeavor for people's empowerment, which still remains an important thrust for us in St. Kitts and Nevis at this particular moment in time. When the member for number 3, our Minister of Health, comes to address the health matters, I would ask her to say something in terms of some of the work that has been put forward, and to ask that at least for our upcoming cabinets, we can put this matter more firmly on the national agenda for government action by having the recommendations or at least an update on the work of the committee. I should say in this matter, our Governor General has a great interest, and I myself have had several meetings with him and several ideas that have come forward. But we have put a structure in place, and I think it is time for us to have a formal report so that we can concretize the actions that we will take in this regard. I will ask the Commissioner of Police if he would come forward and address the matter that been put with respect to the police investigation. And he will then be followed by the Attorney General and the good governance agenda. We have Minister Hamilton, who will come on the criteria, and then we will have the Minister of Public Infrastructure, and he will be followed by the Minister of Health and the Minister of Labor. Thanks.
Good morning to all. The question posed by my good friend Mr. Cornelius, that the police force is responsible to maintain law and order in the Federation. And as you are aware, we're in a pandemic, and there's the COVID-19 Act that the police has asked to enforce. So as a result, officers were assigned to check on business premises to see that they are complying with the Act and the protocols. On the 8th of January, 3 officers visited the last club bar. As a result, an incident occurred. Police has investigated this matter, and the file has been submitted to the Director of Public Prosecution, who is the competent authority for these matters.
Thank you. We'll hear from the Attorney General.
Good morning to everybody. SK Newsline has asked us to give an update on the good governance agenda, and in particular to reference questions of the integrity in public life and the freedom of information. As far as these 2 items in terms of the good governance agenda, one would say that they have been passed into law. And in terms of the integrity in public life, this has been significantly advanced. Quite recently, we would have had a report from the chairperson of the commission. I should state first that the commission has been established with the chairperson in the person of the former or retired Justice of the High Court, Justice Pauletta Lance. She also has, as members on the commission with her, Mr. Dennis Freddie Knight and Mrs. Carolyn Body. They form the commission. There is a chief executive officer who is in place in the person of the former director of audit, Mr. Albert Edwards, Bertie Albert Edwards, and they have now established a permanent office on Liverpool Road upstairs of Daly Walwyn. They have been working assiduously over the past months to get the system ready. They have submitted 2 reports so far on their work, not only in the activities that they've done, but also in reporting on the financial situation of the Commission, as monies have been appropriated and have been assigned to them. These reports, by law, are expected to be tabled in the Parliament so that everyone will be able to see the work of the Commission. At this point in time, the Commission is trying to streamline, as we move forward, a number of the regulations that are required to have those who should submit declarations to the Commission do so. I think that the question raised the point that not just public servants, but others, and I suspect them in parliamentarians, ministers of government, and others, will all be expected to submit declarations of their assets every year. These, of course, will be done so, covered by questions of privacy. They're not public documents per se, but they are expected to be maintained by the Commission. And if there are any untoward, significant departures in terms of the declaration submitted, the Commission would be required to do further investigation. We have heard from the Commission that at current legislation, some 1,400 individuals would have had to be covered. And one of their things that they're working on is to see how this number can be reduced significantly on the 1,400 to be able to make it more effective. Those who would not be covered by this act would also be covered by other forms of legislation. But as I said, the reports that have been submitted by the Commission, the chairman of the Commission, the chairperson, Madam Justice Pauletta Lance, would be required to be filed in Parliament shortly. One further thing I will say on this point, and that is the Commission is waiting on a date, an order which would require all those who are required to do so to submit their declarations to the Commission, and that this date would be published on their website and for everyone to be aware that this has happened. The question, as I understand it, also spoke to the Freedom of Information Act. What we have had is a number of information officers who are now being employed in various departments, and part of their remit would be to organize information in such a way that any requests for information would fall within a certain set of protocols. There are certain time frames that are required by law, and this still has to be operationalized fully, but work is ongoing in terms of freedom of information. I think the question also then went on to ask about questions of electoral reform, and specifically mentioned the boundaries. I would have mentioned at the debate in December, the budget debate in terms of appropriations, that we have in place a new chairman of the Boundaries Commission, as mandated by the Constitution. Sections 49 and Section 50 of the Constitution of St. Kitts and Nevis establishes how this Boundaries Commission is established. The Governor General appoints a commission, a chairman of the commission, having had advice from the Honorable Prime Minister and with consultation with the Leader of the Opposition. He has appointed Mr. James Buchanan, licensed land surveyor, to be the chairman of the St. Kitts and Nevis Boundaries Commission. The Prime Minister would have nominated 2 members of his benches, on the benches, the government benches, to be a part of that commission as well. And the Honorable Sean Richards, Deputy Prime Minister, and the Honorable Akila Byron Nisbet have been appointed to be a part of that Boundaries Commission. The Leader of the Opposition would have appointed 2 members to sit on that commission as well. And the Right Honorable Dr. Dennis Douglas has appointed himself, as well as the Honorable Mr. Dr. Jeffrey Nisbet, Jeffrey Hanley, I apologize, to be a part of that commission. So the commission has been constituted. It's an independent constitutional commission on which the chairman has the authority to establish schedules of meetings. I should point out that this commission has 2 mandates. One, to see if there is a need to do any changes to the current boundaries. First, in the terms of the numbers of individuals per constituency, or for that matter, to see if there's a need to increase the number of constituencies in St. Kitts and in Nevis. And this mandate is governed by a schedule of regulations to be found in the Constitution that says that the constituencies in St. Kitts should be near equal in the number of inhabitants, not voters, but inhabitants, so that if you live in a particular constituency, the numbers on that representatives have responsibility for should be equal in number of inhabitants to those in another constituency in St. Kitts, and similarly for Nevis. And why there's a distinction is that the population of St. Kitts is larger than that in Nevis, so it does not mean near equal across the board. That distinction is important. And so that is something that has to be closely looked at. A second condition in terms of the Boundaries Commission would to be if there is to be an increase in the number of seats in St. Kitts and Nevis, that there must be, the numbers in Nevis must now reflect 1/3 of the numbers of constituencies of the overall number. Currently, you would be aware that in St. Kitts we have 8 constituencies, and in Nevis 3 constituencies. If there was to be an increase in the number of constituencies in St. Kitts, Nevis must have 1/3 of the total number. So if you wanted to put it up to 9, that's a quarter. If it went to 10 in St. Kitts, it now requires Nevis to have 2 more seats. So that is something that have to be aware of. But the Boundaries Commission is expected to meet shortly, and I'm sure the commissioners, the chairman and the commissioners would make the necessary announcements to the general public. Just to say that the Commission is expected to produce a report which is submitted to His Excellency the Governor General, and based on that report, the Prime Minister should make a resolution which is submitted to the Parliament, which, if and when voted on in a positive manner, will create new boundaries in St. Kitts and Nevis. So that's the question of that. In terms of electoral reform, I'm pleased to say that over the last 3 to 4 weeks, I accepted a request by the Electoral Commission to meet with my office as the line ministry that gives support to the work of the Electoral Commission. Again, too, the Electoral Commission is an independent body set up by Constitution, and that Electoral Commission has as its chairman Mr. Nazibu Butler, as solicitor, attorney at law, Mr. Nazibu Butler is chairman, and on the advice of the Prime Minister, Mr. Joseph Liebert, former Assistant Commissioner of Police, acts on one side, and the Right Honorable Denzel Douglas, leader of the opposition, would have nominated Mr. Attorney at Law Jason Hamilton. So the Electoral Commission is comprised of Mr. Butler, Jason Hamilton, and Joseph Liebert, constitutionally, and their function is to supervise the supervisor of elections, whose remit is to ensure that there is a proper registration of voters in St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as in conducting the course of an election. In the meeting, the Commission has presented to me for onward submission to Cabinet and formally to the Parliament if necessary, a number of recommendations in terms of electoral reform. And the public will be hearing of these shortly, more and more. There are such things as having votes to be counted at polling stations. Currently, the practice is that once you vote, at the end of the polling day, they're then transported to a central location, oftentimes causing a lot of delay, a lot of logistics in terms of security and so forth. But the recommendation, one recommendation, is that presiding officers should do preliminary counts at the polling stations before transmitting them to the returning officer, who would then have the final say in submitting them to the supervisor of elections. And there are other recommendations that the Electoral Commission has made that needs to be properly ventilated, and these in time will be announced in more detail to the general public. I hope that gives some reassurance as to the work that is being done. Thank you very much.
I want to thank the AG for answering that, but it's so fundamental an issue that as Prime Minister I have to add my voice to it and to say every commitment that we have made in the context of the good governance agenda, we will in fact fulfill, because it's critically important. And it is interesting that it is at this time that matter comes back again for public discussion, because it was in January of 2015 that we saw how democracy and good governance had gone awry. Luckily, the country has not had to relive that. It was in January of 2015 that general elections were announced in ways which were later found to be illegal. In February it was just days before we went to the polls that we know whether we were in bound constituency 7 or constituency 8. In an abnormality that expressed itself when we went to sign our names to formalize our candidacy on nomination day, the returning officer had 2 forms that you sign. One in case you end up in number 7, once in case you end up in number 8. That was the lived reality, and how far we have come to that. From that, under Team Unity government, where the institutions of democracy are in fact allowed to fulfill their significant mission and purpose. For 20 plus months, we could not bring a motion of no confidence in the government to Parliament. What have we done? We went to the Parliament being victims of that and passed a legislation mandated that a motion of no confidence must become by a specific date, I think 21 or so days after it was stable and ready to be presented. So we are doing things in relation to that agenda. And we have had one. And in 7 days, we brought it to the debate in the Parliament. So we have been practicing it. So sometimes it's easy for people to use these sexy phrases about good governance, not understanding and appreciating how far the country has come, and there is no crisis in the good governance agenda. Of course, we must always be reminded, and we accept that. We accept the need for good governance. That is why we pass the Public Accounts Act to ensure good governance. It in the context of St. Kitts and Nevis. And it was a major addition. And the former Prime Minister in Antigua, Baldwin Spencer, when interviewed at Think and Win or some public radio station, said he liked the St. Kitts and Nevis model. There were arguments in the debate about who should report to the Public Accounts Committee. The Public Accounts Committee is headed by the leader of the opposition. And the leader of the opposition has not called one meeting of the commission in over 7 years. Good governance agenda requires good people to do the work. And the leader of the opposition is found wanted. So when persons come to make certain queries, you want to understand, well, what is the concern? What is the concern? Because while some want to keep this alive as if something is awry, in a way that is pervasive in the governance, the international reports say differently. You go to the World Justice Rule of Law Index, we're on top. Just on the 12th of January, our ambassador in the UN sent me something entitled not UN, the OAS, Selected Performance Measures of Democracy for OAS member states on the control of corruption, political stability, voice and accountability. And on every head of these, St. Kitts and Nevis in the top 5 also. He went on to point out where we stand on a number of these matters with respect to the great United States of America. We are committed to the good governance agenda, and we are working it. Information Act, we operationalize it, we put somebody in place. The truth is, some of these things, frankly speaking, they require a lot more work than had been contemplated to make them effective. Who will provide the information? what security will be there. That is why we needed to have the Protection of Information Act to go as an accompanying bit of legislation to protect the people, to protect the people, and to protect information that ought to be held confidential. So Pondy don't wake up one morning and say they want to get this and that of somebody's personal business. So it's a delicate balance. And we must be clear that we are small nations, nation limited with resources. I am sure the Attorney General would have wished that all these matters, he had enough resources to put people to deal with these matters that are there. And they are important. And the short point I want to make, the Team Unity government remains committed. And there is enough work that has been done in a consistent way to deal with these matters. And one of the important pieces of legislation, as we speak to the issue of corruption in the country and elsewhere, is the Procurement Act, held in abeyance before Team Unity, now operationalized, headed by the Financial Secretary. We didn't amend the Act, it was there, we just brought it into being because we recognize that putting the Act was part of the game that those before us were playing. So anybody say, do you have a Procurement Act? You get a tick, you have it. But are you using it? Up to yesterday, the AG advised me, he perhaps has a representative there, that there was a meeting of that body. So contracts of a certain magnitude, once it involved government money, it ought properly to come to the procurement board. That is part of the Act. You look at the sections, and the Financial Secretary, as the chair of that board, has a legal obligation to ensure that she tracks the government money, whether it is to a statutory body or otherwise, and to ensure that the procurement rules are being observed. Never in existence before. Does it solve all the problems? No, because there is no creature, there is no entity that you could devise that will stop bad people from breaking the laws. What you want are systems of control that once wrong is being done, they come to attention and there are checks and controls to prevent reoccurrence and to bring those culpable to justice. And that is what we are committed to. And that is why we give support. Just this morning at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, I was conferring with one of my ministers. And that minister was saying, we need to do this. I said, but we can't do it just now because we just come out of our budget. And I am not going to be able to sign an advance warrant unless at least it meets the test of having gone to the procurement board. That is the law. That is how we are attempting to do. And I'm not going to be asleep and bury my head and to say there are nothing about which we ought to be concerned. What I would say, we are developing the systems and allowing those systems to work in a way that ensure that our citizens and residents can achieve value for money from the work of the government, and we abide by best practices. So I'm encouraged to have that discussion. In fact, truth be told, just this week I said to the Attorney General, we need to have a frontal conversation about these issues of good governance. I am happy where we are at. I would be happier if we were further in the implementation. But I would say no government before us and no government in the region would have done more than we have done in relation to this in the short time frame in which we are there. And I haven't settled with the AG whether it would be on the Popular Leadership Matters or a press conference. I'm trying to find a vehicle that the AG cannot speak for too long in relation to this, because this is a topic about which I know that he's passionate and committed. So on that note, I want to invite my good friend and colleague, the Honorable Jean Hamilton, to address the issue raised, and to thank the media for bringing it to our attention, and to encourage them, though, to look at all those things that we have done in order to enhance the good governance agenda, which we believe in. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bart, for the question. As I understand it, you questioned the criteria for the distribution of homes or allocation of homes. I got it right? It is interesting that that question should come on the heels of a most successful ceremony which was held last Friday. I think that was a ceremony when I pointed out to the public, and I will say it now, that it represents, and it represents still today, a microcosm of the demographics of our society. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we do have individuals who are Santo Domingans living here. We have Jamaicans, we have Guyanese, we have them all. And in that celebration, there was evidence of at least one person from Santo Domingo who now live here for some 20 or more years, from Jamaica, living here for quite some time, Guyana, living here for years, while they were also nationals of St. Kitts and Nevis. And in that ceremony, there were notable persons who represent the Labour Party, not PLP, not PAM, not CCM, but also the Labour Party. It shows the inclusiveness of the government of St. Kitts and Nevis in distributing the assets of St. Kitts and Nevis. But let me just add that there are over 6,000 or more persons out there with land allocated to them in different parts of the country. Many of them may have paid for their lands, some have not. When they do make applications to the National Housing Corporation for assistance, one of the things that we try to get them to do is to at least approach the bank and make sure that they are bankable. Maybe that's not the correct phraseology, that they can move the bank. In cases where that's not possible, the National Housing Corporation, if it can, will encourage those persons to put themselves in a position to qualify for such a home. What does that mean? They have to show, they should begin to save. There are many persons out there who want a home, but nobody beginning to put anything aside towards the home, so we encourage that. I like to call that exercising thrift, demonstrating that you can pay the National Housing Corporation for its home, for the home. So that is one of the things that we do. The board will then consider the application. Remember, there was a time when large tracts of land were available, and NHC would be able to build 10, 12 homes on one plot of one area of land. Many of those are not available anymore because they are all separated across the country. So individuals would apply, and from the application process, a decision is made based on what needs there may be. So you will find that the decision to build a home on someone's land would have been made long before the stone is knocked. So when that house is given out, it's not a decision made at the time of distribution of the home, but a decision made because that person qualified first, they were not able to move the bank, and second, they are in need. There are also some times that we have to apply issues that have come from Ministry of Social Services, for example. And in St. Peter's, you have Parry, for example, where persons have received homes. They did not even apply, but their circumstances were so dire that we needed to rescue them from the indigent position in which they were. It is a government of compassion, of course, and that is why we do that. So basically, individuals apply. So if you don't apply, then they're not in position to be considered. If you apply, then you may be asked to qualify by getting loan from a bank to be assisted. And if you're not capable of doing that, then of course you move to the next phase where you may get assistance through funding from NHC if we have the funding. And remember, we're just coming out of a COVID situation where there was not much activity. So those 18, in fact 20 persons who got homes in St. Peter's the other day, whom I want to congratulate them for being selected, were selected based on the Board of Social Security meeting and evaluating all of the needs. In fact, 18 of the 20, because 2 of those were built on land belonging to those persons. But the other 18 were in 3 units. These units were unique. I believe that's why maybe it has attracted so much attention, that they were built 3 buildings made up of 6 units each. The units at the end of each building were of 3 bedrooms. One main bedroom was on the ground floor because we were saying from the start that individuals who would be chosen should be either large families or at least recognizing that individuals may be in those households with older folks who cannot climb stairs. That is why that bedroom was built on the main floor downstairs to accommodate that large family. So the criteria, if I'm to sum it up in a few words, you have to apply, you have to qualify, the board makes the decision, and in some cases, we may have to make decisions to support families that are in positions of indigence and need help otherwise. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone. On the question raised about the traffic lights and when we can expect those traffic lights to be commissioned, I said to you that on the 5th of March, we have a traffic engineer who arrives on island from out of Jamaica by the name of Mr. Cross. When he comes on island, the expectation is that the traffic lights will be commissioned. However, I want you to note that there is one exception. We are still navigating some issues relative to the traffic light at the junction of the Newtown Bay Road and Bird Rock. I am not certain if by the time he arrives, if we would have already successfully navigated the issues that we are experiencing there. Therefore, if we have not been able to do so, all of the other lights are expected to be turned on shortly after he arrives on island, with the exception of that particular traffic signal. To the second question, which was posed relative to potholes along the Old Road Bay Road, I indicate to you that that road isn't completed. While it is that the road has been opened for usage by the public, in terms of the road being officially handed over to the government, that process hasn't taken place. When government commissions a project, you have a process whereby at the end of it, you have the engineers from the Public Works Department, or if you have outside consultants, such as the case of the Old Road Bay Road, who would make that determination in terms of the completion of the road. When the work, the paving in particular, began at Old Road Bay, it was recognized by those responsible for doing the quality inspection of the roads, of the road, that indeed there are some issues with the quality of the road. Those quality issues have been pointed out to the contractor and they are to be corrected. there are sections of the road which has to be re-asphalted, or I think there is some intention of using some sort of technology to correct the defects that persons would see in sections of the Old Road Bay Road. On the issue of drainage in the Taylors area, unfortunately, I'm unable to respond to that particular question. I am not certain as to what the particular issue is, and more details would have to be provided for me to be able to provide a more fulsome answer or to get the necessary information from the Roads Department. Thank you.
A pleasant good afternoon to all. Mr. Cornelius, in terms of the question regarding the Buckley's uprising and the monument, there was a committee that was established some time ago. The committee have been working to determine how best we can place a monument in recognition of the Buckley's uprising. In doing our research into the space, we learned that in the early 2000s, there were a number of historical sites that were designated as historical so that those lands would remain with the National Historical Site Committee and with government. Unfortunately, the Buckley's estate was not designated in the early 2000s as a historical site. And therefore, in our research and investigations, we learned that the lands were actually sold. And so where it is that we were trying to build a monument within that space, we later learned that that land was no longer in control by the government. And so in order for us to be able to do that, we would have had to consider repurchasing the land, trying to move persons from where they are. We were in conversation with one of the mechanics that resides on the land. We also had discussions with Sustainable Development and trying to see whether or not we can move the mechanic, but it comes down to logistics. Would he be able to get a space that's adequate enough for his operation based on how it is now? And those discussions were not very easy, as there was not an area that was identified that he too was comfortable with. All that would have been taken into consideration. The other option that we looked at was the roundabout heading down towards Buckley's and placing the monument there. That is under the control of Social Security. However, there were some of the committee members who were not comfortable with that idea. They thought that the monument should be where the Buckley's uprising actually happened. And so, as the Prime Minister indicated, the report will be submitted for us to make a determination on how best to move forward in terms of the monument. Is it that we are going to try to see how we can get some of those lands back so that we can place the monument there, or are we going to use the roundabout that Social Security now have and place a monument there in terms of recognizing the Buckley's uprising? But whichever option we choose, as the Prime Minister indicated, we will be placing a monument in recognition of the Buckley's uprising. In terms of the digitization of health and health records, as I would have indicated in the budget address, we are in the process of getting our health information system up and running. The hope is that by this year we will be able to implement the health information system. Before we can actually put in the database, because then this would mean that everybody's records would be in a database accessible by computers, which means that the system must be accessible at all times. It must be able to be ready to use whenever the doctors or nurses need to enter information or retrieve information. That therefore means that the infrastructure must be in place to be able to support such a platform. Where we are right now is we have already submitted to the Ministry of Finance the approvals for us to be able to begin the infrastructural work that is necessary for us to be able to have the health information system up and running at JNF. How we are just awaiting those that approval. Once that approval is given, we will then be able to put the infrastructure in that would then allow us to be able to begin a phased approach in terms of getting the health information system up and running. And so we are hopeful that we will be able to have that done by the end of this year or even before. As you know, it would take time. It has to be a phased approach. So we have to make sure we test it in a live environment to make sure that the system is working as expected. And then we would have what we called a approach where we're using the paper-based as well as the system for some time, make sure that information is correct and the information collaborate before we roll over to the complete digital system. This system as well will be able to connect the primary health care as well and the health centers. And so in the next phase, we will then look at how we would then connect all of our community health centers back to JNF so that your information collected within community would be shared with JNF and vice versa. So all of that is in the works currently, and we are hopeful that the first part of it, which is on the JNF side of things, the institutional base, and not just JNF, but also Pogson and Mary Charles would have the health information system up and running this year. Thank you. Just one thing before I go to, we have just wanted to, first for general information, the Prime Minister stressed a lot on the importance of primary health care. And I just wanted to let the public know that the Ministry of Health is doing free health screening, monitoring, as well as free HIV testing today in the parking lot at Bladens. And so we are asking persons to come and get your health screening done. We don't want you to end up in our institution. We would like you to be able to take care of your primary health early so that you can avoid getting there. So if you visit us at Bladens, all day today, you'll be able to get free health screening and testing as well as free HIV testing. Valentine's Day is coming up, so I'm sure many of you would want to get what we've dubbed your lover's license. Make sure you have that negative HIV test, and so you can enjoy the Valentine weekend. Thank you.
Thanks. There was a matter raised which I will ask the CMO to address, and that was with respect to the restrictions. We just today announced restrictions vis-a-vis entertainment and sports. So the issue, and we are doing this in a phased way, as we have always said, that we will go in a phased way to get our country where it needs to be. We are also always mindful of the vulnerability of our health system. I want to make the point we cannot go sometimes as fast as larger countries, United Kingdom, Sweden. Some of them have abandoned the mask wearing, etc. And in time we will come to that. But we also always have to be mindful where we are at, what our system can withstand. This is one of the reasons why the World Health Organization says we are giving the general prescription, and each country has to work it to take into account where they're at. If you ask, for example, how many beds we have in any ward of the hospital, it gives you an idea of what the sense of exposure we can invite as we open up. Because you have to plan the what-if scenarios. What if on the flight 30 persons come down with COVID and they are serious? Where are you going to put them? Which hospital? What will that do in terms of disrupting the way the hospital is being organized? So these are some of the practical considerations which impact upon how far we can move in the relaxation of some of the protocols we have put in place for the public safety. So I just want us to be conscious of that. But the issue then of mandates and all of these issues, Madam CMO, it may be a good time to hear your voice and those matters. But as we give you time, we have the Minister, Wendy Phipps, who will address those matters put in relation to the labor matters.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think if I recall correctly, there was just one main question on labor matters, and that would have been presented by Mr. Glenville Bart from MyView News, if I am not mistaken. And the question was, if I recall correctly, that an update is being asked on the issue of persons who were terminated from their jobs for not taking the vaccine and have not received severance. Based on our records at the Ministry of Labor, we have no such case where an individual has been terminated on the basis of not taking the vaccine and has not been paid severance. That is the short answer. Having said that, I know that social media would have been rife over the course of several months relative to persons who it was believed would have been terminated for not taking the vaccine. The only company, our records indicate, where letters clearly stated that the terminations were COVID-related was the Rams Group of companies, Rams Trading Limited. And in those cases, in particular, the workers at the Port Zante location, it was not a choice that they had, because in order to be open for business, to be travel certified, the staff, because it was considered a high-risk area, and we had accepted a certain amount of risk when it came to the admission of cruise ships with certain quantities of positive cases on board. In an issue like that, those individuals had been fully paid their severance. So again, we have no record on file at the Ministry of Labor where any individual would have been terminated on the basis of not taking the vaccine if it was COVID-related and they did not receive severance. However, I would hasten to add that in cases where persons would have been terminated without cause but were paid pay in lieu of notice, the law allows for that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think the question spoke to or referred to countries that are, employing or going the route of relaxation of measures with respect to COVID-19, and when will we be engaged in a similar manner? What I would say is that given our high vaccination coverage rates, let me just share those again. 76.9% of the adults in our population fully vaccinated, and 16.2% of the children aged 12 to 17 are fully vaccinated. When we look at the entire population, 55.5% of the total population fully vaccinated. So given our high vaccination coverage rates, and given our successes in terms of our containing the first three waves, and where we are at in terms of containing this fourth wave, we have already started in terms of relaxing measures with respect to COVID, and we will continue doing so. Our borders are now open, and that's air and sea. So in terms of our accepting inbound air travelers, we accept tourists, international travelers who are fully vaccinated, and even our own returning nationals. And once they meet the landing requirements, they are free to integrate in our society. So it's only those nationals who come in who are unvaccinated, they are asked to quarantine for 9 days. So our borders are quite open and porous in terms of air travel. In terms of sea travel, we accept cruise ship passengers. And so all cruise ships with a positivity rate less than or equal to 2%, they are granted free pratique. And the cruise passengers disembark and they are allowed to integrate with our people. And just today, the Honorable Prime Minister, he would have announced that we would reduce restrictions on mass events and sporting activities as soon as Saturday, February the 12th. In terms of sporting activities, meaning the National COVID-19 Task Force, we've met with the SKNFA, that's the St. Kitts Nevis Football Association, and already approval was granted for the restart of football in terms of the grassroots, youth, and women's leagues. So in particular, I know for sure the Senior Women's League. And so yes, approval has already been granted for the restart of football. We've already, meaning the National COVID-19 Task Force, we've met with the Athletic Association, and approval granted for the under 12 athletics, sporting meets, etc. Just this past Tuesday, the task force engaged the St. Kitts Amateur Basketball Association, and we started discussion as to how basketball can resume. There was also a question that spoke to events and sporting activities, and if patrons vaccinated and unvaccinated would be allowed. I don't think we can give a blanket statement in terms of answering this question. What we can say is it depends on the event or the activity and the level of risk and the organizer of the event or activity. I think those would be the factors that would be determining if the patrons would be vaccinated or unvaccinated. And I think this would be announced ahead of the event. There was also another question in terms of plans to protect the health system and to prevent its becoming overwhelmed by COVID-19. That's a very good question. What I can say is that already we have contained 3 waves, and we are almost at the end of this 4th wave without our health system becoming overwhelmed. The government has injected quite a bit of funds in terms of strengthening our health system. We've procured the relevant personal protective equipment and gear. We've procured adequate medical equipment and supplies. We have engaged a team of case managers. They help us to manage all the positive cases, to help to maintain health and to help those individuals recover with respect to their not progressing to severe disease. And so the case manager model that we utilize has helped us to reduce or to keep our hospitalization rate at its lowest, and also to keep the death rate where it's at. And so we will continue utilizing this model of using case managers. We will continue the public health interventions and measures that have worked so far. And within the Ministry of Health, we will continue doing our forecasting. These are all the measures that we have employed to help to prevent the overwhelming of the health system. And these we will continue. I left the hardest for last, and that's the whole issue of mandates, vaccine mandates. What I would say is that as a federation, we have done well in terms of the rollout of our COVID-19 vaccination program. It's almost 1 year, and we are 3rd in line in terms of within the Eastern Caribbean and CARICOM in terms of the high level of vaccination coverage rates that we have achieved. We were one of the first in this region or in this sub-region to have more than 40% of our population fully vaccinated. And we've done so without vaccine mandates. And so vaccine mandates, it's very controversial. I don't think I would, go there right now. What I would say is I want to use this opportunity right here this morning to speak to those who are unvaccinated amongst us. The most recent deaths, meaning the most recent 11 COVID-19 related deaths that we've reported, they were all unvaccinated, they were all older adults, and they all had chronic underlying medical conditions. So what I want to focus on this morning is I think we all need to each one reach one in terms of if you know older adults who are unvaccinated, let's reach out to them and empower them with all the information that would be required to bring them on board so that they can give themselves that added layer of protection against COVID. So persons are saying Omicron is mild and you could easily fight it off. Yes, if you are younger and if you don't have any underlying medical conditions, but it's the older adults who we take the virus home to. They are the ones who end up in the hospital. They are the ones who end up very ill and dying. And so we want them to come on board in terms of accepting the vaccine and giving themselves that additional layer of protection against severe disease and death. And so that should be our focus within our various ministries, within our organizations. You know those who are unvaccinated and help us plead and reach them. Each one reach one in terms of accepting the vaccine and keeping our death count at its lowest. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, in extension of the point I raised relative to severance, I just wanted to stress again, just because someone is terminated from their job doesn't automatically mean that they qualify for severance. I just want to be abundantly clear about that. And again, as I said earlier, someone can be terminated, receive without cause, and receive pay in lieu of notice. In a case like that, they are not eligible for severance. The grounds for severance are clearly articulated in Section 5 of the Protection of Employment Act.
Thank you very much. We have been here for quite a while. I want to thank all those who put questions. We had several media houses, and we have attempted to answer all of these. There was the question on the carnival closing ceremony, and we will try to get that information to you. The minister with responsibility for carnival is not here. But I want to thank all the cabinet colleagues for being here and also for being available to take questions on their department. I want to thank the senior officials who have come and have added clarity to some of the issues on the public domain. I want to make one correction in my extemporizing regarding young people and work-related issues. I did say that my supervisor at Social Security, well, one of them was Ernest Amry, I'm told. It should be Stanley Amry, a short, bulky man from Birdwalk. So that is the one. Cephalin Lawrence, the wife then of our financial secretary, Wendell Lawrence, and Miss Yearwood from Pickapay Alley. Those were the people who I met and who grounded me well at the Social Security scheme. I want to thank my colleague for reminding me to bring clarity to the Amrys. So thank you very much, one and all, for participating in this, our first press conference. From the large number of questions, it certainly has several issues, and we have addressed them. And I hope that the media would faithfully report the content of the press conference and, of course, our responses to the issues. If there are other issues, we certainly can take them on next Tuesday on Leadership Matters, and I'm sure Ms. Bryan and her team would be available to take questions via social media and via their phones soonest. So I bring this first press conference of the Office of the Prime Minister to a formal close, and to thank all who have come out for their interest and for their participation. Thank you very much.